Brainstorming, as most of us experience it, is not very good. So we've all been in this situation, right, where we stand up like, okay, everybody, we're gonna brainstorm. And then usually the loudest, most controlling person grabs the pen. And right there you've got a problem because they determine what does and does not get written up here. And sometimes somebody says a really great idea and this person is like, I don't like that idea, or I didn't hear you, or whatever it is, and it doesn't go up on the board, right? Another problem is, for all of you out there who are introverts, brainstorming is horrible. It's exhausting because the extroverts don't stop talking. They're just shouting stuff because they think that's the key to brainstorming. And then the introverts are just sitting there and they're kind of like, you know, I have a really good idea, but I just don't know if I have the energy to get it out in the room right now. And they're just sort of like, and so you're just getting half the group's ideas up on the board, and that's not particularly helpful. Meanwhile, extroverts tend to talk in order to figure out what they mean. And so it takes them about 5 minutes of saying something to actually get to a nugget that you would put up on the board. And at that point, the other extroverts have been chomping at the bit to give their ideas, and the introverts have just checked out. They're just done. And so brainstorming, the way it's ordinarily done, just doesn't put people at their best. And it doesn't take into account that people are very different. They think differently, they act differently, they engage with ideas differently. So Quiet Loud Brainstorm was designed using the neuroscience about how we all think and engage with ideas in different ways in order to be much more productive, much more quickly. First thing you do is you set out clearly, what are we going to be talking about? What's the issue? What's the problem? Make sure everybody has that straight. Next thing you do is you set aside about 5 minutes for everybody to write down their thoughts on that problem to themselves. Next thing you do is you have people have one-on-one conversations where they just share what they wrote down. Those conversations are literally like 2 to 3 minutes each. They're very quick, just sharing. When that section's done, you have everybody spend about 2 minutes quietly reflecting, because they may have thought of something else in those conversations. And once that section is done, you now open the floor to a larger conversation amongst the whole group. And that can last 15 minutes, a half hour. You can go back into quiet for another 5 minutes. It can kind of, especially if you find like, okay, we're getting into free-for-all craziness. Everybody quiet, 5 minutes, what are your thoughts? So it gives you an element of control to shift the dynamic. One of the keys to this is making sure that you give equal weight and value to the loud part of the process and the quiet part of the process. You don't want to say 5 minutes of quiet and everybody writes down their ideas in a minute and say, like, okay, well, let's just move on. It's 5 minutes, right? Even if only one person in the room needs the 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes. It needs to be given its due. And the same is true of the getting loud. Even if it gets really quiet in the room, you're like, we gave it this amount of time. We're going to just sit and let it happen. You'd be amazed what happens when you just allow quiet to be in the room. And somebody breaks it, and they usually break it with something really interesting. And the reason is because it took them a while to believe it was safe to share this particular idea. And if they're having that kind of trouble with the idea, there's a high likelihood it's a catalytic idea. So you want to leave the space for that catalytic idea to happen. Or even in the quiet parts, for each individual, really be open to whatever comes in. Just write it down. The self-censoring very often is destructive to this process. You really want to leave yourself open to whatever happens. And you're in a group, so you probably can't do that have a glass of wine thing. But if you can, it can be really helpful for this process. People can get into a state of mind where they're trying to convince everyone in the room that their point is correct. And really what you're looking for with a Quiet Loud Brainstorm is you're looking to just share the ideas and have the ideas bounce off each other to see what emerges out of them. So when you get in that state of mind where you're just trying to show everyone that you're right, you're breaking down the ability of the group to really allow the ideas to flow and see where they go. And so that's the idea earlier when I was talking about the loudest, most controlling person grabs the pen. If you have a tendency in that direction, you really want to try and tamp it down and just put your ideas out into the room and see what happens, see how other people respond to them. But this, not to get hyper-Buddhist here, but getting really attached to your idea is harmful to the process. Because there's a process to it, because there's specific steps you're taking, as opposed to an open-ended brainstorm, people can get very disillusioned when they don't come to an agreed upon answer at the end. When you have an open-ended brainstorm and you don't get anywhere, you're kind of like, yeah, figures, that's sort of what I expected. So all of a sudden when we bring in a process, there's like, oh great, this is going to end with an answer. And again, like with some of these other processes, it doesn't always end with an answer. So it very often ends with a lot of ideas to chew on, and the answer will come later, again, when you're spacing out. But we have just so much cognitive energy. This is another mistake we make, especially here in Silicon Valley, right? Just work harder. Just work harder and the answer will come to you. But we know from the science that that's actually not true, and it's diminishing returns. And so I would not stay in a quiet, loud brainstorm session for more than 2 hours. Your brain just is not going to be very helpful, and then frustrations are going to rise. And then when that emotional frustration sets in, now you're really undercutting the process. So you're trying to keep everybody in a good space at the same time. So you're weighing both of those things.
To recap the process, first set a clear goal. Then 5 minutes of the quiet bit, writing down ideas. Follow this with 2 to 3 minutes of one-to-one conversations expressing the ideas, and then another couple of minutes of reflecting. Once the reflection is done, 15 minutes opened up to the group to talk about what you figured out, and then if things get out of hand, do the whole process again.
Conversations can get into ruts in the same way your neural pathways can get into ruts. And so this is another way of opening you up to new conversations. Take advantage of all the ideas in the room. It's to find a smooth and comfortable way to encourage everybody to share what they're thinking and to let those ideas bounce off each other, influence each other, connect with one another to create a new way forward.